Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, where we're helping leaders live with integrity.
Whether you're a mom or a CEO, you're a leader, and how you lead matters. Living Wholehearted means that we're honest about all of who we are and how we struggle. We're in the middle of a series on sexual wholeness, and we have a special guest with us today. Dr. Sheri Keffer is the author of Intimate Deception, Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal. And for 20 years, she's been working as doctor of marriage and family therapy in Newport Beach, California.
Dr. Keffer is also the regular co-host of the nationally syndicated radio talk show, New Life Live. Jeff and I have spent 20 years working with helping leaders live with integrity, and sexual addiction and sexual betrayal have just really been at the core of the work we've been doing. And Dr. Sheri Keffer brings an integrated approach to betrayal recovery with her trauma, her neurobiology, and her spiritual formation integration in this profound work, and so important today. We're so grateful to have her on the podcast. Thank you, Sheri.
It's great to be with you too.
Well, Sheri, we love to hear more about our guests and where they're at in life. Tell us a little bit more about you and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, well, you know what's so funny? If you would have told me, Tara and Jeff, that I would be on with you today and we would be talking about the betrayal that happened to me in my marriage that I loved and fought for, I would have told you, no, I don't think I'm going to be telling anybody that, because of the tremendous amount of shame that is attached to what happens to us as betrayed partners. But what is so amazing about God is He truly does restore. And even though in my case, my marriage was a casualty, my life, because of His goodness, has been anything but that. And He has just redeemed, like made fish and loaves of the ache in my heart and the pain and all of that. And so right now, today, I am a part of helping betrayed partners heal. And every single betrayed partner I talk to, I feel like I'm reaching through the airwaves or through that workshop I'm speaking at or through the Facebook Live, and I'm reaching in to pull her husband, her spouse, her boyfriend, her son, whoever is struggling with sexual acting out. It's like I'm trying to pull them out of the mud with her and for her. And so it's an honor to be here with you guys today. I do have some Facebook Lives that I'm doing right now, which is very exciting. They're free. And I also have my website is braveone.com. It's BRAVEONE.com. And I have a Brave One community that is for betrayed partners. We have a private Facebook so that I can get up close and personal with them and help them heal and work with them in light of what their family needs. So it's truly the redemption of God. And I'm grateful to be here with you guys today.
We're grateful. We're grateful for the work you're doing and the extent of your reach. I actually heard you for the first time at a conference all the way in Nashville. We're both from the West Coast. We're in Oregon, you're in California. And I was in Nashville at the American Association for Christian Counselors, and we were both speaking there. But I snuck into your breakout and I thought, oh, wow, this is powerful, the work that you're doing. And we've been utilizing your work in intimate deception, and all the things that you're doing are really helping even our audience. We know that the work that we do, Sheri, stems from our own stories, and you mentioned that a little bit. Tell us more. What about your own journey has brought you to do this work with so many?
Yeah. Well, let me give you and Jeff a little shout out. I've got to tell you, you have a very special place in my heart because you work with leaders that are dealing with these issues, right? And I was married to one of those leaders. I was married to a pastor who was struggling with pornography, and which eventually led to affairs and prostitutes and all of that. But what you two are doing now to break in, to have these conversations, to open up places for people who, as both of you know, for a pastor who was struggling with sexual acting out, for him to share it openly many times means that he might lose his job, where it's different when it comes to other leaders, and unless you're a leader of a big Christian organization. But my story is, Connor and I got married, and we had, I was in a singing group, and I was going to a Bible college, and I was in school with his brother, and his brother was married, and they had kids, and I just loved them as a family. And so his brother, Connor, who I married, came into town. And I had told his brother one point, I said, if you ever have a long lost brother, fill me in. One of those comments, because that, like, I think you're all that in a bag of chips, and it would be so cool to meet, a family member if you knew him. But so Connor and I dated from that moment on, for a year. And we saw each other 12 weekends, right, before we actually got married. So that probably tells you a little bit about my history.
Mhm.
I consider myself trauma squared. I had some trauma in my family of origin, and I also had trauma in my sexual betrayal with Connor. And so I had some intimacy issues that I wasn't even aware of, because when I met him, he was working as a pastor, and I was enamored with him and captivated by him. And so what I didn't realize is that this whole sexual struggle was happening underneath the surface of the ground. And I knew about one thing. He had called a 900 number, and in that day, and it's a sex line, right? It's a sex chat line. And I was naive enough to think that those numbers were just like a recorded message. But I didn't know until we were in treatment that it was a real person. But when he told me that, I was heartbroken, shocked, confused. I didn't know what he was talking about. I was very naive. But within a couple of days, I forgave him,
Mhm.
and then moved forward. And now I look back at it, and I didn't ask any more questions. And I think I looked at myself and went, well, who am I? I'm not perfect. But I spiritualized it that day, and I didn't go any deeper. And so that led us into a marriage with years of sexual acting out. And um, regardless of the treatment, we were 4 years in therapy. And regardless of the treatment we had, Connor's sexual acting out went more underground. And so our marriage has ended. But I feel like I said earlier, God continues to work to use this to help other families heal.
Your story, I think, not only gives you incredible credibility for the work that you're doing as you understand it from the inside out, but it's also, I think, helpful for people to hear that your marriage didn't make it. That's often the message in the church, and it's hard to understand because we want restoration for every piece of this brokenness. Can you speak to that a little bit? Just to the person in the audience that just feels already discouraged, like, wait, what? You went through this and then your marriage didn't make it?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something. I never fought so hard, Tara, than I fought for Connor.
Mm,
And I think that's in the heart of us as women. I think it's some of heaven that God has infused in us, that it's the heart of God. We fight for ourselves and for those we love. And so to have it not end up, to have the work, the effort, the therapy, everything we did not end up in restoration, was
mm,
heartbreaking. And it left me with some shame. Like, I've failed. What's wrong with me?
yeah.
How did I not? What did I miss? And you know how our failures are teachers as well. I think some of what I talk about in my book as I'm teaching others what I would recommend for them has come out of the missteps that were a part of my journey. And there's so many more resources today. And I want every betrayed partner to have the gold standard of care. I want their family to have the best chance at restoration. And the word, ancient Hebrew word for lust, is ava. And back in the day when Hebrew was written, it was written in word pictures, much like Chinese or Egyptian. And let me tell you what this word lust meant in word pictures. It's the strong nail that binds you to itself.
Mm.
The opposite is kind of a derivative of that word. It's kave, which means hope. And hope, the word picture for that is what comes after the nail. So
Mm.
my life is actually hope filled, not because my marriage was saved, but because God is using what came after the nail to bring hope into other families, right? Bring a path into other homes. And, every time a family gets the resources they need and I watch them move forward, it's kind of like it moves hope forward. And I think that's truly what you and Jeff are trying to do with this podcast, with your upcoming book, because if we can help our leaders um, find that hope, what comes after the nail, God can use them to restore other families, just like He's doing with me.
Thank you, Sheri. Oftentimes, the betrayal work is focused on codependency recovery. And you know this. How do you think this is helpful? And where do you think we need to expand this kind of recovery work?
Great question, Jeff. So this is the deal. When the world of alcohol addiction started our whole recovery movement, when betrayal happened or sexual compulsivity happened, they took those same models that they used for alcohol addiction and they put that on those of us that are struggling with sexual acting out. And while they thought it would work and fit, it didn't quite fit when it came to the betrayed partner. And so, this idea of codependency or co-sex addict, um, through the years, the last 10 years, has become more of a harmful label for some. Now, some people get it; they feel comfortable with a co-sex addict, where others go, or a codependency label, but others go, "That's just not really me." Now, let me say this. Codependency made sense to me because remember what I said? I grew up in a family and I'm trauma squared. So,
Mm.
separate from the betrayal with Connor, I would have still struggled with issues of codependency. But when a partner comes in and they're in pain, and as my research shows, they've experienced and they are experiencing the symptoms of post traumatic stress, we unknowingly, as treatment professionals and kind of in our uninformed, maybe not up with the latest whatever state, we do our best, but because we don't know what we know, we put that label on betrayed.
Mhm.
It's like all of a sudden we walk in and the shame we're already feeling, now you might as well just wrap us up in some, another, label.
Exactly.
Another weight, a blanket, weighted blanket.
Exactly. And so what I tell people, and I share this with you, I treat the trauma first. I see them as a person who most likely is experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress. So it's not that there's something wrong with us. It's something that wrong happened to us. And then once I get that partner into a place of safety, and once we go through the therapeutic full disclosure and they're in truth and there's some recovery, and they've got some time and there's stability back in that relationship, then I might be looking at some patterns of codependency, right? Because codependency, what is it? It's untreated trauma. And so it might be that there's trauma underneath the betrayal trauma, but I don't start with that first. I really try to treat their pain and from the impact of the betrayal.
I just love that, Sheri, because again, as a provider who's been working in this field also for 15 years, it's just been so difficult to help people understand the trauma side of this. And so you've really brought, with your research and your book, just some clarity as you've integrated. So talk a little bit more for the listener who's maybe in this place or has a friend or someone who's mentoring someone. Talk about what the most common needs are for that person recovering from betrayal. What are those core wounds?
Yeah, appreciate that. I think the core wounds are not being validated, not being believed, not being heard for the pain that they're experiencing right there at ground zero. And, Tara and you and I both know this from, being therapists. So imagine this. Okay, imagine this. And Jeff, you could imagine this from, I'm sure you climbed a tree once in your life, but imagine you
Mhm.
grew up and you were climbing a tree and you fell out and you broke your arm and there it is dangling, right?
Mhm.
And as a kid that happened to you, right? You broke your arm. So now let's fast forward your life. You've gotten betrayed, and as a partner you go in to get some help to a treatment professional. Now the professional doesn't know everything about you, but you walk in the door and the professional can see that your arm is hanging, this tendon is hanging from your arm, and so the professional looks at you and says, wow, I can see that you're in a lot of pain. So why don't we talk about the time that you fell out of the tree when you were 8 years old? Now, that completely misses the current experience of that betrayed partner who came into the ER room for the hurt that he or she is experiencing from the sexual acting out, from the deception, from the lies. It's kind of like as therapists, we're trained to go back. So those wounds, you ask about the core wounds. One of the first one is, I wasn't seen. The very professional I
Mm.
went in to get help missed me. And then the other thing that I would talk about that happens so often is shame. Shame is the culprit of all chaos. And so shame beliefs get wired in by our brain in an effort to protect us. The brain is trying to keep you safe at any cost. And so it wires in these negative beliefs about ourselves. And this negative belief sounds something like, I'm not enough. I can't trust anyone. I'm not in control. I'm helpless. I'm powerless. And it's like bad Velcro, right? It sticks to us. And so betrayed partners begin to feel like they're at fault or they're not good enough. They're not pretty enough. Their body isn't right. I should have done something.
Mm.
All these lies are really shame's way of trying to keep us safe. And if people don't understand that, they can begin to believe these shame beliefs are true about who they are. And I am passionate about helping people get that figured out. And in my book, I go over and teach things called a 180-degree turnaround, which is how I can take that shame belief, that lie, as I call them, those nagging neggies, and turn it around so that you can actually get your truth and sanity back.
So good. Before we continue, I really wanted to connect the dots between something you just shared and what you shared in the very beginning. One of those shame statements, which sounds so godly and biblical, is, I should forgive him. Why
Mm.
can't I forgive him? Speak to that a minute.
Or her.
Or her. We'll just,
Yeah.
yes.
So, it's really interesting. So sometimes I think we bounce into forgiveness. And I say bounce into it for a very good reason. It's like we don't want to feel the pain. We don't want to acknowledge what's could be going on. We don't want to have to deal with the hurt if I really stare this ugly thing that just happened to me in the face. So I feel the need, right, unconsciously to move quickly to forgiveness when there's more that needs to be unpacked. And so I call that cheap forgiveness, right? It's we haven't really dug into that, the shame and the wounds, and gotten clear answers about what's going on. And so if we do that, then actually a lot of times, and in our case, this happened. The sexual acting out, because I did kind of that quick forgiveness, it kept growing. It was like cancer
Mhm.
and things didn't
Mhm.
stop. And so I think sometimes in the church, we've heard the messages, we need to forgive. And so when somebody does something wrong, we hear that in our head or somebody maybe even tells us that. We go to a pastor recently. Oh my goodness. Recently I was talking to someone on New Life Radio, and it was a woman that called in, and she went in to speak to a pastor. And this reflected so much of my experience too, and
Mhm.
shared what was going on in their marriage. And the pastor, bless his heart, this is what he's been trained in, these concepts. But he said, well, I really think you need to forgive him and he needs to love you more. Well, that's what I was told with Connor. And it felt like a broken record. I kept hearing that in
Yeah.
church and from
Mhm.
treatment professionals and people I trusted. And so because we kind of just he was having a hard time stopping. They said, you just need to stop and love her more. But problem wasn't love. The problem was that he was hooked, right? He was hooked to the porn. He was hooked to the acting out. It was that lust, that strong nail that binds you to itself. And so all the love in the world, all the forgiveness in the world wouldn't have saved him. What saved him, or was needed to save him, is some good old fashioned recovery work in an SA group or an SAA group, and some guys that get it, that could come alongside him and fight for him and fight with him, and a good therapist that can help him get into the wounds of where this all came from. And that is not easy work. And
Mm,
forgiveness becomes, I guess, I've never said this before, but I think quick forgiveness, cheap forgiveness can actually be complicit. It can
mm,
actually make it complicit with the sexual acting out. We think it's all over, but it is not all over. It has just gone underground.
That's right. That's right.
mm,
Thank you for that clarification. It rings true with the work that we do in many scenarios over the years. Sheri, you wrote this book, Intimate Deception: Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal. To tell our audience how this book would help them or someone they know they're working with. It's an incredible resource, and we use this in our clinical practice.
Wow. Well, thank you. I appreciate knowing that, right?
You're welcome.
Um, what I didn't have back then that I really wished I would have had was a roadmap. Somebody to tell me, these are the most important things you need to know. These are the most important things you need to understand. These are the most important steps to get healing. This is what's happened to you, just to normalize what my experience was. And so, again, I talking about my story, talking about this failed marriage, I would have never thought I'd be penning this book in the last couple years, really, if you would have thought years ago. But because I kept working as a therapist with so many betrayed partners, and we wander aimlessly, we don't know, I just said, enough. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to bring the good parts of me and the bad parts of me in this book, right? I'm going to be very honest, which I am. I talk about my STD, right? Because I
mm,
want women to go get the testing done. And I talk about the path of therapeutic full disclosure. What does it look like to tell the truth, right? I talk about the shame. I talk about our body and how we need to tend to this body that we live in because it's gotten overwhelmed. So much of my book normalizes the experience, but it doesn't just leave us there. And it's not just my story. It is a clear 20 chapter action packed resource for any partner that has been betrayed, either in the past or in the present, to what they need to do to heal. Because I truly believe if I can help that betrayed partner get what they need to heal, right? Most of us are flat on the ground because we're just wiped from all of this. But
mm,
if I can help us get up and become stronger, we become powerful warriors in the kingdom of heaven. And we can find our voice and we can fight for ourselves, our family, our husbands, our boyfriends, for those people that we love. And we can find ourselves again. And I truly think my goal is that this book can be a resource of hope. And you know what's so weird, Jeff? And I appreciate you
Mm.
talking about that. You guys use it. I have a lot of guys. There are pastors now of churches that are asking their guys in their groups to read this as a
yeah.
resource.
You bet. Sure. That makes good
Because
sense.
it's like all of a sudden they go, oh my goodness, I hurt my wife. Like what I did really hurt her. And it kind of legitimizes, and it is someone who's acting out. It's a friendly book. I have a lot of love for them in my heart. So it's a friendly book for them to read as I'm trying to help them understand what's happened as well.
Mm. I'll just attest to that. I mean, I was one of those people who was just frustrated as well with the resources and again, the limited perspective on the recovery process without the trauma lens. And so I just recommend this resource in huge ways. and want to just say that it really is profound for someone who's working through their betrayal to just feel validated and to understand the trauma piece. And it just slows everything down to really understanding the PTSD piece of this. So it's unique to that.
I'd say even just to validate what you shared about the men reading this, I think that even if they aren't in a relationship or in a situation where they're where they may not be realizing that they're hurting someone or what have you, but just to have empathy, to grow in empathy for women in their sphere of influence and in relationships that may have been affected by this.
Yes.
And it's important to understand how actions impact others, and empathy. Right, we would all agree the world could use a lot more of that.
So true. It's so true. And I actually have a chapter that addresses that, Jeff. It's called How He Can Help Her Heal. And
Good.
I talk about the difference between the medic and the mechanic. Like the mechanic is the guy that comes in and wants to try to fix her and, just get her over it and tell her to stop. And that was, last week, and I'm different this week or last year or whatever. And it's that fixing way of trying to get over the hurt that they feel for over what they've done. Right. So they're looking for the best path. But then there's the mechanic. The medic. And he's the guy that realizes, oh, yeah, I'm the one that threw the grenade into the foxhole. I blew this thing up, right? And so I want to be able to help her get out. I need to help her. I need to hear her. I need to own what I've done and atone for what I've done. The ancient Hebrew word for peace is actually a component of it is shalom. It's actually restoration. Right? To have restoration means shalom. And that word picture says to make secure, to keep safe, and to impart comfort, to encourage one who was once fearful by restoring them with peace. Shalom also carries with it this idea of compensating somebody to make them whole or good again for something that was stolen or lost, stolen in a sacred trespass. So the guys can truly learn how to come in the spirit of shalom. Like, I want to restore you. I want to help you heal. And that chapter talks about how they can do that in a very practical way.
That's so good. What a great word to end on. Where can people find your resources, Sheri?
Yeah. So the best way to get to me would be braveone.com. It's braveone.com. And on that website, I've got blogs, I've got some great information, some free information. I also have got places you can take a peek at my book. I have something called God Sightings because God, in his love and mercy, has shown up in powerful ways at the conferences that I've been able to be at. And so it tells you a little bit of stories about that. And I have a whole chapter about that in my book. The thing that I want to share with you guys right now, again, what I brought up in the beginning is my Facebook Lives that are free, that are out there to give you some great information. And then the Brave One community, which is brand new, and it's for betrayed partners so they can get closer to me, folks that needed help but were out of the country or out of the state, and I just couldn't give them the attention that I felt like they needed. Now the Brave One community is a place where they can get the goods and get the encouragement and bring their hearts, ask their questions, and I meet with them every week. So check it out. And I'd love to be able to be there to help you. If you're listening right now, I'd love you to know there's a place with someone who gets it, who really wants to help you heal and who wants to fight for your family as well.
That's fantastic. I'm so grateful for this resource. And I'm just also grateful because Sheri is one of our amazing experts and speakers for the Encourage Gathering this summer. So make sure you register to get access to her resource or her breakout at theencouragegathering.com.
Well, getting to the roots is vital in all of our stories, and we hope that this series on sexual wholeness is helping you lean towards grace and finding hope. Our book is on pre-order anywhere you buy books, Shrinking the Integrity Gap Between What Leaders Preach and Live. we're talking about that today. And we'd be honored to have you help us with pre-orders, as those make a huge impact on who hears about the resource.
And don't forget to leave a review for this podcast, because the more great reviews we have, the more people will hear the goodness of God's love and his heart for us, even in the mess. So next time, Jeff and I will be wrapping up this series as we discuss some of the most common questions we hear in our offices around sexual brokenness and healing. And we've just been so grateful for you and your desire to join the movement to shrink your own integrity gap. Thank you for joining us in being a leader committed to shrinking the integrity gap between the values we espouse and the values we actually live out in practice.